I think meetings like this are really important for bringing people together from different disciplines. What I would like to see would be a more common theme that the information that's shared here be used to help animals. So I'd like to see a large practical aspect of this meeting, but I think these meetings are wonderful, and oftentimes after I leave a meeting like this, I don't realize how good they were until months later.
It's a great conference. There are many disciplines and many inspiring talks. So I think it's very important that it happens anyway, because the animal question is very important nowadays.
Okay, the conference, I think it's great. It was a great opportunity to meet many people with many different commitments to the cause of animal rights, and also the interdisciplinarity is also very well represented at the conference.
The conference has been very frustrating for me. We're in a situation of planetary emergency. All of the species are at risk. Whether it's mammals, cetaceans, birds, they're all being exterminated. There's a global war on animals, in which one species is waging war on vulnerable populations throughout the world. At least over 100 million animals each year are being killed and consumed by human beings. None of that is necessary. It's been shown empirically and ethically. And yet we continue. Meanwhile, we're destroying the habitat. Global warming is pushing thousands of species and billions of untold beings, numbers of beings into terrible suffering and premature death. And yet we have this conference here where there isn't a fundamental questioning of our relationship, the underlying relationship of our species to the rest, which is a relationship of domination, control, and mass extermination, and mass murder, honestly.
This second Mining Animal Conference is, to me personally, a very nice opportunity to have the experience of bringing very different scientific disciplines together, plus policymakers, plus stakeholders, now all those groups being in contact in some kind with animal welfare issues and problems and thoughts. That's a very, very nice thing to experience personally as a chair of animal welfare. What I think is that we can learn a lot from such meetings, and that is on the content, of course, through exchanging opinions and knowledge and all these kind of things. But I think what I personally take with me from this conference too is that we have to still learn to talk to each other in a better way. We still tend to get a bit stuck within our own way of thinking, and it makes it very difficult to really find into a dialogue. And I think that these kind of meetings really are very necessary, very useful in learning about that.
I believe that mining animals is a wonderful concept. It's allowed scholars, scientists, humanities, scholars, veterinarians, as well as activists and advocates for animals generally to come together and dialogue, building bridges to talk about our differences. And I think this is a major step forward in the idea of protecting animals. Mining animals, I believe, now stands at the forefront of this, and building bridges is an important tool in protecting animals, and I'm very pleased with how we've gone both here in Utrecht as well as in the place of the
Well, it's so exciting to see the explosion of interest in animals and to think it's in every direction. So I just barely know where to go, and on each panel session there's something I want to go to, and there's 8 parallel sessions. So it's been a really super time for me.
I think it's a great conference. I've been to Newcastle 3 years ago, and I'm really glad that the discourse which is developed in the US and Australia now comes to Europe, and it's great to see so many activists and academics, people from animal welfare and animal philosophy, animal ethics come together, talk to each other, and also people from the arts. I'm from the arts, and humanities and stuff. And I think that's Mining Animals is such a great platform to bring together so many different perspectives on the animal issue. And yeah, I'm glad to be here, and it's working very well, I think.
I totally agree. It's a great event, a great possibility to meet people again, whom you got to know in Newcastle and in other conferences. I think it's almost too much, it's so overflowing, so much presentations, but it's very inspiring. And the one little sadness is that we people from the music field, the musicians, the musicologists, we are clearly underrepresented, which we have to blame on ourselves, I think, and we should change this for Mining Animals 2015.
Animal rights for the future is actually, it's a little complicated. So in the United States, for the first time ever, per capita and total meat consumption has actually gone down. Now this is huge. And at the same time that meat consumption has actually gone down, the number of vegetarians and vegans has increased. And not only increased, doubled in 1 year, up to 5% from 2.5%. So these are both huge trends, and actually the industry is freaked out and doing everything they can to try to bring people back into the fold, if you will. At the same time, globally, meat consumption is increasing, and the United Nations predicts by 2050 that it will actually double. So in the small scale, locally, in California where I live particularly, and across the country, we're making tremendous progress. More people are going vegetarian and vegan, more restaurants are going vegetarian and vegan, more students are going vegetarian and vegan. But globally, we have to somehow rethink the strategy to think beyond just our local place that we're at, and somehow make the connections we have to make, particularly in India, China, and Brazil, to try to make some more large-scale change for all the animals.
I think the current animal rights situation in the world is getting better. I like to think of it in terms of animal protection, because we need to deal with people who are for animal rights and for animal welfare. So I like the term animal protection because the word animal rights tends to alienate people, and the word or the phrase animal welfare is too soft for me. But I do think that the situation in the world is getting a lot better. I travel all over the world and I meet really wonderful people who are working very hard for animals. So I'm an optimist.
Well, there I'm much more depressed, I guess, because the conference really highlights the enormous challenges that we have in front of ourselves. And I'm pessimistic, I have to say. I wish there was hope, but I really don't see much hope.
Yes. How many angels can dance on the head of a pin? There are these, we're trapped in this kind of head game of philosophy and positivistic sciences, where we argue about, well, how many should we kill? Or can we justify this form of killing? Does it hurt an animal to kill an animal? Literally, I went to a panel, one panel where the philosophers were actually asking whether it causes harm to kill a being, to the being. I went to another panel on how to mass kill, murder thousands of animals with what? Should we shoot them? Should we gas them? Should we cut their throats? Should we just crush their brain, shoot them in the back of the head? This was literally a panel at an animals convention or conference. That is not minding animals. That's showing other human beings how to exterminate animals, and I don't think it has a place in our movement.
I think that, well, using the term animal rights then, of course, that is a term that quite often is, acting kind of triggering to scientists, for example. And that has a history, it's understandable. I do think that during such a meeting, as we are having now, we can see that those parties, which still are supposed to be very opposite parties, are coming a bit closer together and are understanding, all of those different parties are understanding that it is, of course, an important thing to trigger each other, but to talk to each other in a very open way too. I mean, the conference is named Building Bridges, and that, I think, is a very important thing. And everybody, all parties being involved in the discussions on animal welfare issues, need to be willing to open up their bridges and invite other parties to come over and try to share their point of view, their perspective, learn about the way they perceive distinct problems, but being open in themselves too, to try to share the perspective of the other party as well. And that then, I think, will create a very constructive dialogue. And again, I think that this kind of meeting can really add on to that development.
Animal rights is changing. There is still strong support for an abolitionist stance for protecting animals. But I think animal rights is changing insofar as becoming a more mainstream concept. It's one where people that you see on the street actually say, oh, I care about animals because my cat is sick and I have this affinity with the cat or the dog that they have as a companion. And I think it's become much more deeply ingrained into a broader society, and I think that animal rights is changing in that regard for the positive, much more positive for the animal.
My interest is in birdsong, and so because of my interest in sound, I'm particularly interested in pollution, noise pollution for people and also for animals. I just read a really interesting thing that I'd never thought of. You assume that if noise pollution gets bad, that it could drive animals out or make it impossible for them to breed. But what I hadn't realized is that you could have a perfectly suitable habitat for a species and they could still be driven out just because of the noise pollution, which is rather disturbing when you think that there's so little habitat left anyway, that anthropogenic noise could be doing this. So that's the kind of thing that I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about animal welfare right now.
I don't think the situation is a good situation, but I don't think it's a static situation. I have the feeling that it's a dynamic, or you could say unstable situation, and I have the impression that in the European Union things are getting slightly better, but I would dare to say which the general tendency is.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's, I'm rather pessimistic actually. I think the situation is not good enough, of course, even though it is changing in the, at least in Europe and North America, maybe Australia as well. I don't know about the situation there, but I think it's getting worse in India and China now. People are eating more meat there, for example, and so on the global scale, it probably gets even worse, or will get worse in the next 10 years, but still, I mean, we are fighting to